Lithuania may be one of the smaller members of the European Union, but it just did something huge for Ukraine, reaffirming its commitments to Kyiv and cementing its status as one of the country's most reliable and steadfast allies. Even Russia cannot believe the levels that Lithuania is willing to go to in order to support Ukraine and counteract Moscow's aggression. And if other countries across Europe follow this nation's example, then the Kremlin's war machine could be in far greater trouble than anyone anticipated. The news came on October 28, when the recently elected Speaker of the Seimas of Lithuania, Juozas Olekas, made his first visit to Ukraine in his new role. Olekas has spent time in the past as Lithuania's Minister of National Defense and as a member of the European Parliament, so has a long career in politics and a strong understanding of both diplomacy and national security. During his time in Ukraine, Olekas met with multiple officials, including President Stefanchuk, chairman of the Ukrainian Parliament, Minister Shmyhal, the Minister of Defense, and the country's President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He also took the time to sit down with local journalists to answer questions and discuss in detail what Lithuania was doing to help the Ukrainian cause. During these multiple meetings, Olekas spoke about his vision of a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. He also discussed ways to accelerate the country's accession into the European Union, along with matters related to security cooperation, joint arms production, and participation in international coalitions. The Seimas Speaker also made two enormous announcements to Ukraine's leadership and to the wider world. First, he had a message for the Kremlin, proudly proclaiming that Lithuania will never recognize the annexation of Ukrainian regions. It will never see territories like Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk as being part of Russia, no matter what dirty tricks Russia employs or how the war pans out. Lithuania will continue to stand with Ukraine both now and into the future, and Olekas argued that the country should not face any pressure at all to simply give up its land to its enemy as part of a potential peace deal. This matters a great deal, because Putin doesn't just want to take land from Ukraine, he wants to expand his sphere of power and influence on the global stage. That's why he has so desperately sought to convince both his own people and other countries around the globe that Russia's actions in Ukraine are right and just, that it has the authority and even the obligation to invade places like Donetsk and make them a part of Russia. He wants to attach a sense of legitimacy to his so-called special military operation, so that when it eventually ends, the wider world will acknowledge these territories as belonging to Russia and allow the Kremlin to retake its place in world politics. But if nations say no, if they continue to call out Russia's actions for what they are, entirely unjustified incursions involving an ever-expanding list of war crimes, then the Kremlin will never be able to achieve its end goals. It will never return to its pre-war trade agreements with countries across Europe and North America. It will never reclaim its position at the table of international relations, and the world will never simply forgive, forget, and move on from this ugly mess. Instead, it will continue to punish Russia day in and day out while reaffirming support for Ukrainian sovereignty. And if that happens, then Russia will never, ever win this war. Because even if it were to somehow achieve its battlefield objectives and capture the territories it lays claim to, it will suffer the consequences of those actions for generations to come. Its people, businesses, banks, elites, and leaders will pay the price forevermore. Ukraine, meanwhile, will continue to receive support and compassion from its vast array of allies worldwide. It's up to other countries now to follow Lithuania's example and proclaim clearly and conclusively that they too will never under any circumstances see places like Kherson and Luhansk as belonging to Russia. But it was Olekas's second statement that truly sent a shockwave across Kyiv and much further, all the way to Moscow itself. After stating that sanctions on Russia must be increased, the Lithuanian parliament speaker said, "However, we see no signs that Russia is ready to end this war. Only a change in the balance of power can force Russia to seek peace." He then went on to announce a huge pledge of support from Vilnius to Kyiv. "I assured my colleagues in the Ukrainian parliament of strengthened military and political support for Ukraine, as well as providing reliable security guarantees. Our military support for Ukraine will continue at a level of no less than 0.25% of GDP. That means that Lithuania promises to provide at least 0.25% of its entire gross domestic product, the total value of all goods and services produced in the country each year, to Ukraine, not just now, but into the future as well." While 0.25% may seem a small percentage, it's enormous when taken in this context. For reference, 0.25% of the United States GDP would be around $73 billion, based on 2024's total GDP of $29.18 trillion. Of course, Lithuania is a much smaller and far less prosperous nation than the US. In 2024, its GDP amounted to $84.87 billion, according to data from the World Bank. As such, 0.25% of that figure is around $212 million. In September, Roxolana Pydlasa, the chair of the Budget Committee of the Ukrainian Parliament, revealed that it cost Ukraine around $172 million per day to defend its land from Russia. Defense has an enormous financial cost to our country, and it keeps rising. Exactly 1 year ago, I was standing in this room and I told you that one day of war cost Ukraine's state budget $140 million. Now it costs $172 million every day. This figure includes soldiers' salaries, ammunition and weaponry, but also something you might not expect when thinking about the cost of war. Ukraine continues to provide financial support for injured soldiers, those missing in action, and the families of the fallen. She went on to add that Ukraine currently spends 31% of its GDP on defense, which is more than any other nation on earth, before announcing her hopes that Ukraine could secure $120 billion for defense in 2026. Pydlasa noted that half of that sum, $60 billion, would come from Ukraine's own state budget, with the remaining half hopefully being provided by the country's allies through various support schemes and initiatives, like Pearl and SAFE. When compared to those kinds of figures, Lithuania's annual donation of $212 million obviously isn't enough to make a massive impact on its own. It barely covers Ukraine's reported defense costs for a single day. But it's important to look at the broader picture here. There's no doubt that Lithuania is, evidently, unable to impact the war on a massive scale on its own. It doesn't have the economic clout or financial firepower to turn the tide of the battlefield, nor does it have the military might to send game-changing weapons or defense technologies to Kyiv's fighters along the front lines of regions like Donetsk and Luhansk. It understands that. But, just like Ukraine in many ways, Lithuania wants to do the best job it can with the limited resources at its disposal. And the best way for this Baltic state to influence the outcome of the war is not by donating staggering amounts of money or providing fancy fighter jets and high-end missile systems. Instead, its aim is much simpler: to set an example for other, richer and more powerful nations to follow. And that's exactly what Lithuania is doing here. It's telling the world, we may not be an enormously wealthy or influential nation on the world stage, but we're serious about helping Ukraine. And in doing so, Lithuania also asked the question of its fellow European Union members: will you do the same? Will you follow our example and pledge a percentage of your GDP to Ukraine as well? Because if Lithuania, which is a relatively small nation and sits in the lower half of European countries by GDP, is willing to make this kind of commitment, then what's stopping other nations, especially those that are significantly richer, from doing the same? Of course, every country has its own budgetary plans and economic challenges, and even wealthy nations need to allocate their resources in ways their leaders and populations deem appropriate and efficient. Not all of them would be able to feasibly follow the Lithuanian model, but even if just a few more countries copy the 0.25% plan, it could make all the difference on the ground in Ukraine. Taking the United Kingdom as an example, its GDP for 2024 was $3.644 trillion. 0.25% of that amount is just over $9 billion. In 2024, the UK provided close to $4 billion for military assistance in Ukraine. That's still an extraordinary amount, and the UK ranks amongst the most generous donors to Ukraine, alongside other nations like the United States and Germany, pledging a grand total of $16.9 billion to Ukraine since the war began. But if this country was somehow able to match or even approach Lithuania's 0.25% GDP pledge, Ukraine would enjoy unimaginable benefits. And the same goes for many more nations across Europe and beyond. Even if some of the smaller nations were able to look at Lithuania and feel that they could make a similar commitment, all of those additional funds would add up over time. There are so many ways it could put that sort of money to use, whether that be in investments across its burgeoning defense industry, procurement of additional weapons, systems and munitions from NATO allies, or providing humanitarian aid to the countless citizens of Ukraine who've been displaced and seen their lives turned upside down since the conflict kicked off. There's no telling how many, if any, countries may choose to take inspiration from Lithuania's latest announcement. But the Baltic nation is clearly doing the very best it can, raising the bar and inviting other allies to do the same. And it deserves plenty of plaudits for its generosity, as it's exceptionally rare for a country to give this much of its income to an ally during times of war, and even rarer for it to make a commitment to continue that support for years to come. Fittingly, Ukraine's leaders thanked Olekas and Lithuania for such a stunning show of support, with Zelenskyy telling the Seimas Speaker, "We are grateful for your military support, 0.25% of your budget. You have sent a signal to some other countries, which have started considering ways to strengthen Ukraine by allocating a percentage of their GDP and defense budgets. This is important. We are also thankful that we can count on your support next year." Defense Minister Shmyhal echoed Zelenskyy's words and expressed his hope that other countries would tread the same path. Lithuania is one of Ukraine's closest allies, being the first to allocate 0.25% of its GDP for military assistance. Now we urge our other partners to do this. Ukrainian Parliament Chairman Stefanchuk also thanked Lithuania wholeheartedly, held a meeting with the Speaker of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania, Juozas Olekas, during his first visit to Ukraine in that position, expressed gratitude to Lithuania for the consistent support of Ukraine in the military, humanitarian, energy spheres, and in terms of recovery. Lithuania is one of the first places in the world in terms of GDP assistance, and its contribution to strengthening Ukraine's defense capability has already exceeded 1.8 billion euros. Now, speaking to reporters from Ukrinform, Speaker Olekas also urged the international community to take more drastic action as soon as possible. He noted that Russia has shown zero signs of any willingness to end the war, and that any further attempts at diplomacy or peaceful negotiation with Putin may in fact be little more than a waste of time. Our experience, and I think the international experience of Lithuania, shows that the Russian regime, particularly Putin, understands only the language of power. All these diplomatic attempts without a ceasefire, without stopping the aggression, have never brought a final or long-lasting peace. Different leaders have tried to renew peace talks, including the latest ones, and all this shows that there are no signs from Russia to stop its war, just to prolong the aggression, kill civilians, destroy the energy and other systems. This is the main lesson for the international community. We must be united, we must show our strength, we must implement sanctions. Only in this way can we achieve lasting results. Olekas also shared details of other ways in which Lithuania is working to support Ukraine. He spoke, for example, about the idea of more cooperative partnerships between Ukrainian defense companies, especially drone manufacturers, with other military organizations across Europe as a way of both providing investment for the Ukrainian defense industry while also making the continent more resilient to possible drone attacks in the future. Olekas also mentioned using Lithuania's liquefied natural gas (LNG) terminal to supply gas to Ukraine, counteracting recent Russian attempts to damage and destroy energy infrastructure across the country. And this wasn't the only big bit of news to emerge from Lithuania in recent days. On October 24, reports emerged of Lithuania testing both heavy machine guns and Swedish-designed surface-to-air missile systems against high-speed drones only a handful of miles from the Belarusian border. The Lithuanian Armed Forces released video footage of their air defense artillery units training with large-caliber machine guns and the Saab RBS-70 NG missiles, taking out one target drone after another with impressive levels of precision and efficiency. The exercise demonstrated the potential of machine gun turrets to take out drones in a relatively cost-effective manner. It also showed that the Saab RBS-70 NG air defense system could prove to be an invaluable asset when it comes to defending key areas like towns and cities or high-risk border territories from Russian or Belarusian drone swarms. An upgrade on the previous RBS-70 system, the RBS-70 NG introduces more modern advanced features and technologies, including an integrated thermal jammer, auto-tracking sight, and complete compatibility with vehicle-mounted and remote-controlled deployment. It also uses laser beam guidance to strike its targets, making it less susceptible to the enemy's jammers or other electronic warfare systems, and can be even used as a man-portable air defense system, man-pads, making it one of the most versatile anti-drone weapons around. It's not perfect. Each system is said to be quite expensive, and the same goes for the missiles it launches. But at a time when European nations need to be ready for anything and have to quickly find ways to counterattack potential drone incursions, a system like this is a welcome addition to the continent's arsenal. In testing weapons like these so close to Belarus, one of Russia's few allies, Lithuania is sending another clear message to its enemies. It's letting the Kremlin know that its forces are ready, willing, and able to defend their land, and with Lithuanian lawmakers also recently passing a new law that allows the nation's military to shoot down hostile drones in their airspace, Vilnius is doing everything in its power to prepare for war. It's not hard to see why, nor is it difficult to understand Lithuania's eagerness to support Kyiv as strongly and as generously as it possibly can. As one of the 3 Baltic states, alongside Estonia and Latvia, this country is seen by many as one of Russia's next priority targets after Ukraine, and a possible invasion has been on the cards for years. Given that Lithuania shares a 184-mile border with Russia's Kaliningrad exclave, as well as almost a 422-mile border with Belarus, it wouldn't take much for such an invasion to occur. The Kremlin could easily divert some of its forces from the Ukrainian front lines or dispatch a percentage of its recently mobilized reservists to Belarus or Kaliningrad before beginning an assault on Lithuanian land. Russia and Belarus have also been actively poking and prodding at Lithuania in recent times, seemingly testing the nation and the NATO alliance itself to see how it responds to airspace violations. On October 23, for example, Lithuania summoned a Russian diplomat to explain why 2 Russian aircraft, a Sukhoi Su-30 fighter jet and an IL-78 tanker, had been spotted entering its airspace from Kaliningrad. Vilnius demanded an immediate explanation from Russia for this violation and urged the Kremlin to adopt, quote, all necessary measures to prevent such incidents from happening again in the future. Even more recently, on October 29, Lithuanian leaders made the call to close the country's border with Belarus until at least November 30. The ban came in the wake of multiple airspace incidents in which Belarusian weather balloons carrying contraband supplies crossed over the border and entered Lithuanian airspace. This led to multiple recurring shutdowns of Vilnius airport and fears among the population that the balloons could be part of a larger plot to unsettle the nation, with the Lithuanian government directly accusing both Belarus and Russia of a deliberate escalation of hybrid warfare. Vilnius officials have also announced that they will shoot down any additional balloons that enter their airspace, sending another message to their enemies that they're not playing games and will not sit idly by while the Kremlin repeatedly violates their airspace and attempts to spread fear and panic among their people. Overall, Lithuania continues to prove itself as a beacon of support for Ukraine and hope for a stronger, smarter and more unified European Union. It may not have the same budget as the biggest EU nations, nor is it a major military power, but it's still doing all it can for the cause, standing up for what's right and defending peace and justice, both in Europe and the world at large. It's playing its part to the max, and it's throwing down the gauntlet, challenging other nations to do the same. Now watch this video for another inspiring example of a European nation providing incredible support for Ukraine, as France recently unveiled a new military aid package headed straight for Kyiv, comprised of interceptor missiles and fighter jets. Or for a closer look at the latest events on the front lines, watch this video, which explores how Russian troops finally made a breakthrough and entered the Donetsk city of Pokrovsk, but are now being hunted down and taken out by Ukraine's brave defenders. And finally, make sure to subscribe to our trusted military news channel too, for more in-depth news reports and insightful video breakdowns of major developments in the Russia-Ukraine war as and when they occur.